Let's talk about Project 3, Lesson 12. A human chain is formed by 60 people standing with their arms outstretched, each holding the hand of the person on either side of them. The first 30 people in the chain have arm spans of 6 feet. The next 30 people have arm spans of 5.5 feet. At the word of go, the first person squeezes the hand of the second person squeezes the hand of the third, and so on. Assume that each person takes a third of a second to pass along the signal. Which piecewise function correctly models the distance that the signal travels in t seconds? Okay, a lot going on here, so let's consider the information we have and make sure we understand what the question is asking. So we have to imagine this chain of 60 people standing in a circle, and it's split into two groups. So the group of the first 30 people who have arm spans of 6 feet, and then the next 30 people who have arm spans of 5.5 feet. Now, it seems that regardless of how long the arm span is, it says that each person takes a third of a second to pass along the signal, okay? So the question doesn't say that people with longer or shorter arms take more or less time with that. And our question is, which piecewise function correctly models the distance that the signal travels in t seconds? And of course, you're given some multiple choice options here, so make sure you have those in front of you. Now, there are some pieces of information to consider to help us select the correct piecewise function. So first, if it takes a person a third of a second to pass along the signal, how long will it take the first 30 people to go? If it takes a person a third of a second to pass along the signal, how long will it take the first 30 people to go? Now that information is important because notice that this piecewise function is written in terms of t, time. So you'll see that for each option you have functions written on the left-hand side, and then the bounds that make it the piecewise function on the right-hand side, right? We have some sort of relationships going on the right-hand side that are separated by these inequality symbols. Now, the numbers that are filled in to describe this inequality, should those numbers be numbers in seconds or numbers in number of people? Well, it should be in seconds, right? So for example, you'll see one answer option that goes 0 is less than or equal to t is less than or equal to 30. And then from 30 less than t all the way up to 60. Now what these two pieces of the function are describing are number of people. But it doesn't make sense to say number of people is less than or equal to t, which is time, is less than or equal to number of people, right? So we have to keep our units kind of in line here. So the answer option that has this as the bounds for t is not correct. We need to make sure that the piecewise function is representing in terms of time. So consider how long it would take the first 30 people to do that signal. That's going to describe the information that should go in that inequality with t. Okay, and it's up to you whether you think it should be less than or equal to or simply less than. Those inequality symbols will be up to you. Now, if it takes a person a third of a second to pass along the signal, how many people will go in 1 second? Okay, also important to consider. If it takes a third of a second to pass along the signal, how many people per second is that? And finally, if a person has an arm span of 6 feet, what is the distance covered in 1 second? So if you have an arm span of 6 feet, what is the distance covered in 1 second? So consider all of these pieces of information and use it to kind of eliminate and select the correct option for the piecewise function. Lesson 12. Does the signal cover more distance in the first half of the chain or the second half of the chain? Okay, so we know that the time for the first half, so for the first half, the time it takes is equal to the time that it should take in the second half, right? And that information isn't really important here, but I think it's worth keeping in mind. Now, the first half of people, remember their arm span was 6 feet. And then the second half, their arm span was 5.5 feet. Okay? And in each case, it's 30 people. So which is going to travel more distance? 30 people with an arm span of 6 feet or 30 people with an arm span of 5.5 feet?